disappearances is that no one was alone when they were taken. Either families or couples would enter any one of those tall, brightly coloured tents and never walk back out, even though at times these tents were occupied by hundreds of potential witnesses. These cases baffled detectives. How could an entire family seated in the stands be there one moment, laughing and enjoying popcorn, and gone the next? At first, the disappearances didn't do much to deter the steady flow of attendees who wished to see legendary attractions like The Visitor or Madame Levitt's group seances. They thought it was all part of the show, an immersive event brought to you by Mr. Fulcrum's brilliant mind. It wouldn't be the first time, after all, that he had done such a thing. On one occasion, through a complex assembly of visual and auditory trickery, he made the goats at the petting zoo stand up on their hind legs and talk. I will not repeat here what they said. Another time, an employee dressed as a giant worm with the face of an old man used a series of underground tunnels to scare guests by randomly springing up from the earth in front of them or by grabbing their ankles and tripping them. However, it was not just the creativity of Mr. Fulcrum's tricks or the sights which made people flock in droves. You could go there, smack dab in the middle of nowhere, and taste foods from faraway lands like Romania or Azerbaijan. You could watch Siberian tigers fight Alaskan grizzlies, or, if violence wasn't your thing, wander through the world's largest hortus conclusus. If you were lucky, you even had the chance to meet the Green Man. All of this popularity and wealth should have made Mr. Fulcrum one of the most famous people in the world, yet very little was, or still is, known about him. Those who saw him in person, both foreign and domestic, claimed they were not able to tell where he was from based off his appearance, though he had a notable mid-Atlantic accent. He seemed polite and a bit on the quiet side, though it didn't really matter, because whenever he spoke, people listened. Curiously, even back then, there were rumours of a darker side to Mr. Fulcrum. Dogs would either growl or run away when they saw him. Rooms felt colder when he entered. Children would cry and clutch their parents when he walked past. But that hardly steered people away from the carnival. It was just too good. They said there would only ever be one Mr. Fulcrum's Funhouse, always and forever. It was an empire in its own right, unshakable and beyond us all. We were supposedly lucky to have gotten to experience it. I cannot stress enough how high it was held in the public eye. Yet the illusion could not last forever. No mind, not even Mr. Fulcrum's, is immune from error. In June of 1986, a family disappeared during the main event of the evening, Mr. Fulcrum's magic show. As had happened in the past, it went unnoticed for the rest of the night, and likely would have gone unnoticed for much longer. Everyone was too engrossed by the sword swallowers and fire singers. But the next morning, a sobbing boy walked into the local police station and reported the disappearance of his family. That boy was me. 39 years ago, my adopted family fell through a gap that suddenly opened in the stands. I watched as they were taken by circus staff dressed as clowns. Being only 7 years old at the time, I thought it was all part of the act, and waited excitedly for them to appear on stage next to Mr. Fulcrum himself. But as the show went on, and they didn't show up, I began to grow more and more worried. Then, as part of the final trick of the night, Madame Levitt took the stage next to Mr. Fulcrum, who tipped his hat to her and stepped to the side. She was a gorgeous woman. Thick and glossy black curls tumbled down her bare shoulders as she slowly walked forward, hands stretched to her sides, to the cheer of hundreds. Dozens of rings tipped with multiple kinds of precious gemstones shimmered in the firelight conjured by the fire singers, and her fingers twitched and bent in all manner of shapes as she lifted her face to the ceiling and spoke in a voice that didn't sound like it belonged to her body. Then, before us all, she levitated. The audience oohed and ahed, the wave of sound drowning out my tears and hysterics as I frantically searched the stage for my family. Madame Levitt spun on an invisible string as she continued to chant, her green dress spinning and spinning and spinning until she was like a tabletop, a blur of sound and colour. There was a loud pop, accompanied by a burst of energy that splashed over the laughing audience. And then she was gone, along with Mr. Fulcrum. I never saw my family again, and the police never found any trace of what happened to them either. Yet for once, they had a genuine witness to one of the disappearances at Mr. Fulcrum's Funhouse. My story made it over to the press, and once the public saw me crying and begging for the return of my parents on television, there was an uproar for transparency from Mr. Fulcrum and company. They never gave it, and that possibly might have been the end of things. Then another couple went missing the next year, and that's when the government finally got involved. Both federal agents and local law enforcement arrived on scene, and there were arrests made. Apparently, quite a few of the staff had warrants out for their arrest and were wanted for very severe crimes. When other places within the carnival were raided, officers found them curiously empty of the attractions they once held, and there was no sign of Mr. Fulcrum or Madame Levitt. None of the staff told the police where they had gone, and it was not clear whether that was due to ignorance or fear. Upon finding the tunnels, agents were surprised to learn they stretched for miles and formed a network that was so convoluted it took months to map it all out, and there are some who think there were other paths that went unnoticed. Here, I want to make special note that one agent reported finding a tunnel that went down so far that a rocky drop never made a sound. From what I heard, he was put behind a desk for the remainder of his career for making that statement to the press. Years passed, and nothing more really came out about Mr. Fulcrum. Nothing public. But there were whispers and rumours that I began to personally track down after I decided to not re-enlist. I guess here I should mention a bit about what ended up happening to me after I lost my family. I was placed back into foster care, and as soon as I was 18, I joined the Marines. It was an easy decision. I was willing to do anything that would get me off the streets and into a job that would teach me how to never rely on anyone again. I wanted to become so strong and capable that I could protect myself and those I love. And throughout that entire grueling process, I never forgot the hate I feel towards myself for failing to protect the most important people in my life. Honestly, there are times where I wonder if I made the wrong choice. I had a great career with the Marines, and my travels to different parts of the world took away years of my life and burned through a lot of the cash I saved. I never married or had children that I know of, and I suspect this path will be the end of me. But I just can't let them go. My parents were the best people I have ever known. They took in a boy that no one else wanted and showered me with love. And then they were taken from me, and I was thrown back into the hell that is the American foster care system. I need to know why they and all those other people were taken. I need to know what their fates were. Most of all, I need revenge. I have wandered through the dark places of the world for over 10 years, all to find a lead on the one person who can tell me where Mr. Fulcrum is. activity for some pretty big names in the entertainment industry, and you'll find you can secure a meeting. Tonight is the night where Madame Levitt will tell me where Fulcrum went. I am leaving this as a record in case I don't make it back. But if I do, you will be hearing from me. I'd ask for luck, but that would be to rely on someone outside myself, and that I simply will not do. Marcel. I'm sorry, I should not have left you. People who genuinely seem to care, waiting. That wasn't right of me, and I owe you an explanation. Ever since my meeting with Madame Levitt, I have been lying low, trying to process what I learned within her chambers. I think I am finally stable enough to write it down. Before I begin, I want to warn you that knowledge comes at a price. If I were you, I'd turn away and forget about Mr. Fulcrum and Madame Levitt. I wouldn't look any deeper into what the nature of the visitor has to say about our reality. I would pretend that this is just some stupid story and not the last words of a marked man. You have that option still. Do not treat that lightly. It is too late for me, however. My fate was sealed the moment I became an orphan again, but I promise that I will not go down without a fight. I will burn it all to the ground and take this son of a bitch with me. I won't allow another person to endure what I have been through. Like I said, friends, leave while you can. I will go on alone. First, however, your explanation. About an hour after my first entry, I left the hotel and got onto a bus that would take me into West Side Chicago. While I sat there, I looked out onto the passing city, my mind drifting further and further back in time to the day I graduated from boot camp. It was burning hot out on the concrete, but the excitement we all felt seemed to shield us from that. We were part of something bigger than ourselves now, a history that was constantly unfolding, a flame carried for hundreds of years forward. It was what I always wanted. Despite that, I remember also feeling a growing sense of dread as I looked out onto the stands and saw all the families eagerly waiting for the moment they could leave and hug their Marine. There was so much pride in the way the fathers carried themselves that day, and so much love in the way the mothers looked at their babies who had become warriors. Against reality, I wanted so badly to see my parents rush towards me and wrap me in their embrace. But that moment did not come. I watched with an impassive expression as all those families reconnected. There were some people who came up to me and shook my hand or congratulated me, but they didn't linger for long. I was feared. Younger me enjoyed that, felt some power because of it. I realised now that all I was doing was isolating myself further. I had been known as Tyson during boot camp because of some surface level similarities between myself and the boxer, along with the mutual savagery we both employed during hand-to-hand combat. Whether it was with gloves, batons, or pure grappling, I hardly ever lost. And when I did, it was mostly because I let my rage get the best of me. The instructors picked up on that, and oh boy, did they punish me for it. I can't count how many burpees I did, because I couldn't keep my mouth shut. One of them, an instructor we called Kong, behind his back of course, approached me. The crowd parted like the Red Sea before Moses, all plain on their faces. He was 6'6" and had the build of a professional wrestler, along with an air of intensity which made you feel like an ant when standing before him. It was hard to not take a few steps back, but I held my ground. I was a Marine now. He stopped in front of me and nodded. I started to raise my hand in order to salute him, but he waved his dismissively. "Why are you out here mean mugging and feeling sorry for yourself?" "Just the way my face looks," I said. He stared at me blankly, and I couldn't resist smiling after a long moment of silence. "Sir," he smirked, and held out a hand big enough to crush a lesser man's skull. I shook it and nearly yelped from the power in his grip. "You're young and hot-blooded, so I don't expect you to listen. But I'ma tell you anyway. Whatever it is you're holding on to, let that shit go. It'll kill you, one way or another. Maybe I should have listened to him. I'd probably have a wife and some kids, and be living somewhere nice while being plump and retired. The only real danger, prostate cancer or some shit. The ironic part is, I don't think I would be alive now if I had listened. It was hate more than anything else which got me out of fights years later within that graveyard of empires. When others failed to rise from those desert sands, I kept going. Not because of love or hope or any of that other bullshit. Just the desire to never be a victim again. The bus came to a stop. After nodding at the driver, I stepped outside and pulled my hood up against the cool air. With a creak and a groan, the bus rolled away, leaving me alone on the sidewalk. I took stock of my surroundings, looking not just with my eyes, but also by relying on an intuitive sense for danger honed over years spent in hostile environments. Funnily enough, the neighbourhood I was in wasn't entirely unlike the ones I wandered through after escaping from foster care. That's how I quickly knew something was deeply wrong about this side of town. There were no cats skulking around or packs of dogs eagerly running up to check out who the newcomer was. In fact, there were no animals at all, not even birds. As I walked towards Madame Levitt's apartment complex, I peered down various side roads and alleyways and didn't see any homeless folk either. The streets were lifeless, and it wasn't even past 8. The first sign I got that I wasn't completely alone, however, was a light suddenly being shut off from inside one of the apartments after I walked past it. After that, I started to notice if I suddenly looked up at one of the red-bricked tenements I could catch blinds suddenly closing, or, in a couple of cases, the glimpse of frightened faces peeking from a rooftop. It only made me too aware that I was hardly armed. All I carried was some pepper spray and a knife. I picked up the pace. Madame Levitt's apartment complex was practically abandoned. I saw an empty parking lot, and as I walked upstairs, noticed every door was left ajar. From one of the upper landings, I paused to look down at the pool due to some movement I had seen out of the corner of my eye. There was an inflatable lounge chair floating in it. It was stained with blood. I reached the top floor of the building and found myself looking down the length of a yellow hallway with a single flickering light hanging from the ceiling. Faintly, I could hear someone singing, though I couldn't place from where. I steeled myself and pressed forward, reminding myself I had been through worse than this. I knocked on the door to room 1 and waited. In no time at all, Madame Levitt swung the door wide open. It took every minute of training I ever endured to maintain my composure. She hadn't aged a single day. Her hair was braided and decorated with dozens of silver rings in the shapes of snakes, insects, and moons. She wore a shimmering gown with a plunging neckline that revealed ample cleavage. Hanging between her breasts was a spiral pendant that I could have sworn was spinning. I was at a loss for words. With a knowing grin, she beckoned me inside. I was so distracted by her beauty that I barely noticed her nails were made of metal. Her home was lavishly decorated, standing in sharp contrast to the urban brutalism of outside. I saw statues of Hecate, Isis, and Freya, each occupying positions of honour in different rooms. I walked over thick, richly patterned rugs and avoided furniture that looked uncomfortable to into a room she called the Egg. It was aptly named. The floor was sunken, and the walls curved upwards into what I assumed was a rounded ceiling, but I couldn't see it because of a deep shadow which covered the upper reaches of the room. She motioned towards a small wooden table in the centre, which had a large crystal globe atop it. There were lit candles, a teapot with a stylized face on it, and all manner of other props within the room, more than I can possibly describe here. All contributed towards the image of her being some kind of witch, or at least that's what I thought at the time, when I was still a skeptic. You see, up to this point, I thought I was dealing with some kind of human trafficking ring headed by Fulcrum and Lwess. I didn't believe in the supernatural. I had been trained to see reality in simple terms. As a soldier, you focus on what is useful towards the present moment. Too much thinking about alternative possibilities leads to paralysis. So, my worldview was that whatever existed, or rather, whatever actually mattered, was what I could perceive with ordinary senses. All of that came undone when a massive white hand, with fingers as long as my arm, reached down towards the table from the shadows above and poured tea into both of our cups. Madame Levitt smiled at the look of horror on my face and sipped. "Are you not a fan of Carver? I have chamomile, if you'd prefer," she said. I sprung away from the table and put my back to the wall. The pale arm slowly retreated into the shadows. "The fuck is that?" I said. Madame Levitt tilted her head and in a soothing voice said, "He is a visitor. A friend. Do not worry. He helps protect this place." I took a deep breath, eyes still on the shadows above. "Protects it? Protects it from what?" "Please, have a seat, Marcel. All is well." I stood there for a while, and she continued to smile. I glanced at the door, debating running away and drowning out this memory with a bottle of whiskey. Then I thought of my parents and found my courage again. I returned to the table. "What was that?" I asked again. I had to grip my hand under the table to keep it from trembling. "Is that a question, dear?" I froze, recalling the rules my liaison had mentioned to me. Never ask more than 3 questions. That's all the money and time covers. If you ask another, even on accident, you would be required to pay. He told me that cash wouldn't do if it came to that. "No, I apologise," I said. "Very well, let us begin," she said. Her head suddenly snapped back, eyes rolling until only the white showed, and her jaw unhinged wider than any human's was capable of. Living song tumbled out of her mouth, becoming light and shadow in the room around us. I was frozen in place as men and women from times past, present and future danced and spun around our table, the room falling away until we were suspended within a void and they were the only lights surrounding us. Within that deep cold, I could sense unseen things floating past us, bigger than skyscrapers, their minds brushing up against my own, threatening to send me spiralling forevermore into insanity. But I held on like a pit bull to my sense of self, chanting my parents' names within my mind as an anchor until the things drifted past towards distant points of light. 3 questions, child. I couldn't resist. I had questions pre-planned and thought out over the course of weeks, but within that infinity that wrapped the sensory world in its embrace, I yearned for knowledge of this place. Where are we? A space between the end and the beginning, a bridge your ancestors once travelled before they forgot how. She grew silent, though her expression remained ecstatic. I shook my head. That's no answer. Then be more specific. I gritted my teeth. I couldn't hold on much longer. The more my mind tried to comprehend this place, the quicker I felt it slipping through my fingers. And somewhere, a brief pause. Then, Madame Levitt and the watching spirits screamed, their piercing wails reverberating across the void. Presences shifted within that terrible vastness and approached us rapidly, while the glowing crystal orb shifted to the image of a pale white eye filled with an ancient malice. I met its gaze directly with my own and hissed, "I see you too." The presences circled us like sharks, ready to feast upon our fear. Then the great hand of the visitor swatted them away and wrapped us within its embrace. When it let go, we were back in the egg. Madame Levitt was face down on the table, barely breathing. Tea had spilled everywhere, and the crystal globe had shattered into 3 thick chunks. Vapour rose from the remains and dissipated into the lingering shadow above. I got up from my seat and noticed the walls were shaking, like a train was going past, but the vibrations gradually settled until all was calm once more. "You fool," Madame Levitt finally said. She looked up at me, her face suddenly lined and sagging. All of her beauty was gone. "You owe me an answer." She wheezed and coughed up a foul-smelling dark liquid onto the table. It sizzled. That I do. But I'd rather risk the consequences of breaking my oaths than to deal with his wrath. "Please, child, ask anything else." I slammed my knife into the table. "Tell me where he is." Madame Levitt moaned and leaned back in her seat. "I can tell you where riches can be found, or the secrets of immortality, or—" I pulled the knife free and started towards her. She threw up her hands and squealed, "The tunnels! Damn you, he's in the tunnels. But be wary, he isn't alone. You go to your demise should you try to find him." I squatted down and pointed my blade at her. "How do I kill him?" She cackled then, her eyes wide and mouth dripping with that black goo. "Kill him? Oh, you poor man. You have no idea what forces you're meddling with. Flee now and buy yourself a brief respite before his servants come for you. Answer the question." Madame Levitt tried to slash at me with her claws, but I was ready. My blade flicked out and cut a finger clean off. I didn't know why, but I felt a powerful urge to take it, so I stashed the finger into my pocket while she howled on the floor. I stopped in the doorway and said over my shoulder, "Once I am done with him, I will be back for you." I moved to leave, but didn't make it far before being yanked back by the visitor. I thought it was the end for me there, as it pulled me towards the ceiling. But then its other hand lowered. I could see something held there between its index finger and thumb. A golden baton, like the kind they use in track. "Thanks," I said to the shadows. The visitor set me down gently and with a nudge pushed me out of the egg. I made it out of the complex unscathed, though Madame Levitt's screams followed me for blocks. I had no idea how I was going to kill Mr. Fulcrum, but at least I knew where he was. It appeared the agents had missed their target in those tunnels. I won't. Monoliths pregnant with water and fury flickered upon the distant horizon. They drifted slowly, inevitably, covering the earth in shadow. The fear on the flight was palpable, made worse by the sounds of babies crying and first-time flyers yelping every time the plane shook. It was nearly enough to distract me from a distant point by the foothills, where what remained of Mr. Fulcrum's Funhouse gathered dust within the mountain shade. Nearly, the airplane rocked violently again, sending up a fresh wave of screams. The stewardess and her team valiantly tried to calm the passengers down, but I could tell by the rising pitch in their voices that they were worried too. This storm was set to be epic in proportion, one of the most powerful ones in recent decades. My eyes drifted as I tried to blink away outlines of light that that shimmered around others, but it looked like my perception was permanently fucked. When I focused, it helped reduce the brightness of their aura, but then I could perceive beyond the surface to a person's very core. In that deep place was a nexus of energy, an interplay of the purest white light and shadow. Some had greater concentrations of one over the other, yet there was not a single person, no matter how good, who didn't have a bit of shadow. There was also not a single person, no matter how bad, who didn't have a star burning in the centre of all that hurt. You might be wondering whether I was able to see my own deep nature, and the answer is no. Even if I could, I would not want to. You probably think that I am a good man because I have a noble cause, but the reality is I have done a whole lot of bad in my life, and there are times where I feel like the world would be better off if I wasn't in it. The only thing I've ever been good at is killing, destroying. That's weak shit. It's harder to be patient and build something